Hey guys, today we're going to talk about Dreame's latest wet and dry vacuum cleaner, the H13 Pro, which was recently released. How does it do and how does it compare to the H12 Pro? Let's find out. So last year I did review the H12 Pro, the predecessor to the H13 Pro. I'll put a link in the description to that video, or you can click over here to watch it. So how does the H13 Pro compare to the H12 Pro? Well, before we get to that point, a quick and brief intro on what a wet and dry vacuum cleaner is. And it simply is a vacuum that vacuums your floor, but at the same time also cleans them with water and sucks away any wet messes as well. And the advantage of such a machine, instead of first vacuuming all your floors and then cleaning them with a mop and a water bucket, that's the traditional way of doing things, you now can do a 2-in-1 run. As you are vacuuming, the rollers are also cleaning with fresh water your floors and sucking up any wet messes you might have as well. And the concept is simple. There's always a freshwater tank that's always supplying fresh water to the rollers, and a dirty water tank which is storing all the dirty water the vacuum is sucking, along with any debris that you might come across. And the advantage of such a system, in addition to being much more efficient in the sense that instead of first vacuuming and then going over your floors with a mop, you're doing it 2-in-1 at the same time. The other advantage is that you're always cleaning with fresh water. So the fresh and the dirty water never mix, and the rollers are always supplied with fresh water, versus when you're cleaning with a mop and the mop gets dirty and then you have to rinse the mop and wring it continuously. These vacuums are also very effective if you have wet messes on the floor. So if you drop a bowl of cereal and milk, for example, these vacuums can easily suck out the milk and the cereal at the same time and clean your floor in the process. And then when you're done cleaning, you put the vacuum back on its base, which charges the vacuum cleaner, but also it runs a cleaning cycle. So it cleans the roller brushes and it flushes all the internal systems and ducts and empties everything into the dirty water tank. And the last step, which is often found on a lot of the newer models, including the Dreame, it dries the roller brushes with hot air to prevent bad odors and mildew buildup. Quick note that these are intended for hardwood floors and not for carpets. While you may be able to use them on some carpets or rugs, I wouldn't particularly advise that. So now that we got that part out of the way, how does the H13 Pro differ from the predecessor, the H12 Pro? Well, they did upgrade a bunch of things. For starters, the H13 Pro now uses hot water instead of room temperature water to clean the roller brushes, although my tests said otherwise, but we'll get to that section in a bit. It also has larger and upgraded motorized wheels that makes rolling the vacuum much easier, as you get a lot of support from the motorized wheels. The H13 now has 4 cleaning modes instead of 3 on the H12 Pro. They both have automatic mode, which uses sensors to detect how much debris you are passing over and increases the brush speed but also the water flow accordingly. They both have ultra mode, which does an electrolysis of water for deeper cleaning, and they both have suction mode, which does not use any water but rather is used to suck out any water or spills on your floor. The fourth added mode, which is a welcomed addition, and it's actually one of the negative points that I pointed out in my H12 review, is turbo mode. So turbo mode, of course, kicks in the vacuum into high suction, high water flow, which I think is quite useful. So I do like having automatic mode because this makes the vacuum more power efficient. There's no reason to be running at full power when you don't need it. And then when you do need it, the sensors do detect that and kick into higher power. But as I said in my review of the H12 Pro, I'd like to manually override automatic mode and kick the vacuum into turbo mode for one simple reason. The sensor on the auto mode, they detect debris or wet messes. But what if you have a stain or a dried out mess? The auto mode is not going to detect it. And this is where turbo mode, for example, comes in handy by having more suction and more water flow and faster rotating brush. So I love that they added that now to the H13 Pro. They also added LED lights on the cleaning head, which are nice. They're actually quite bright and they illuminate whatever you are cleaning, which is not bad. There's a slight increase in battery life from 35 minutes on the H12 Pro to 40 minutes now on the H13 Pro. And lastly, and this is another thing I criticized in the H12 Pro, there was no filter in the dirty water tank to collect solid debris. Now, a lot of different competitors have that, and the advantage of that, as I said, the vacuum is sucking any solid debris debris as well, and when you're done, you need to empty the dirty water tank, which is going to have the dirty water, but also any solids. And if, let's say, you want to empty it into the toilet, you don't really want to empty the solids there as well. So a lot of the competitors had a filter in the dirty water tank that would catch the solid debris, not the H12 Pro, but now with the H13 Pro, they've added that filter, which is also a welcomed addition. Now let's talk about the performance of the H13 Pro and my thoughts on it. Let me start with the motorized wheels, which are upgraded from the H12 Pro, and they do work. So it is easier to navigate the H13 Pro over the H12 Pro, but it felt a bit weird compared to other competitors that I've tried. It's hard to explain it, but I'm gonna try. The wheels, as I said, are motorized, so they help push or propel the vacuum forward, but you feel it most when you are moving it forward very slowly. The wheels are a bit jittery, so they start propelling the vacuum in a jittery way, just a couple of inches at a time. It's a weird experience. It works. It is better than the predecessor, but I've had better experiences with other competitors. But at the end of the day, it does make operating the machine easier, and you get less tired after a while because it is assisting you to push the weight of the machine forward. Now let's talk about the modes. The auto mode is great to have, as I said, but I found it wasn't very sensitive or very accurate, so sometimes it would not detect the debris that I'm going over and not kick into a higher mode. And sometimes it would take a bit of time before it detects it. So again, I've seen better performance with other competitors in the market, but I like having the auto mode, especially now that we have the turbo mode as well. So I would be operating auto mode always or almost always, unless there's a particular mess where I need more performance, and then I kick it into turbo mode, which is great to have, and I really miss that on the H12 Pro. Now the ultra deep mode, I said the same thing about the H12 Pro. In theory, the electrolysis of water does give you a better cleaning performance. In practice, I'm not sure if this is more of a marketing gimmick or not. I don't have access to a lab or the methods to test out that water after electrolysis and if it actually does clean any better or not. But for me, and that's more my gut feeling, I don't really think there's much utility in the electrolysis or in the ultra mode. The light is a nice addition, not a groundbreaking feature, but nice to have, and it's really bright, so it really lights up the area that you are cleaning, which is nice to have. And as with the H12 Pro, it does have dual edge cleaning, which is really nice. A lot of the competitors don't or have single edge cleaning, and the advantage is that you can get very close to the edge on both sides of the cleaning brush, which is really nice to have. Now, in terms of cleaning performance, I did a series of tests, as I usually do with these vacuum cleaners. First off, I spilled some coffee on the ground and I let it dry out for 12 hours. And as you can see, with one single pass, it got almost all of the coffee out. I did the same test with ketchup, also left it out for 12 hours to dry out. So in some areas, there was a very thick layer of ketchup that had dried out. And as you can see, it took a lot of passes to get it out, but eventually it did get all the mess out. And I do need to note that dried out ketchup, especially in thick layers, is definitely not easy to get out. So despite it needing a bunch of passes to get it out, eventually it did, which is good. I also put on the floor cereal and milk, and these are slightly larger chunks of cereal, and as you can see, it got all of them out with absolutely no trouble. Now, after I was done cleaning, I put the vacuum back on its charging base and initiated the self-cleaning cycle. And here where I was a bit disappointed. So they advertise this as 60-degree hot water, which helps remove, the grime and all the messes on the brush. However, according to my tests, I did not see any hot water, but it was rather room temperature water. So I used probes or thermometers to take the temperature at different points, starting off with the brush, which remained the same temperature all throughout the cleaning cycle. So my expectation was if the water was really at 60 degrees, the brush would at least be warm to the touch after the cleaning cycle. That was not the case. So I emptied the dirty water tank and I ran the cycle again, and I took the temperature of the water in the dirty water tank. logically, this is the water that was used to clean the brushes, and although it might have cooled off a bit after a minute or two, I expected at least some heat in that water, but again, it was completely at room temperature, so there was no heat there as well. I don't know if I have a defective unit or if this simply does not work as advertised, and I've seen that in other competitors where they advertise hot air cleaning or hot air drying, and there was no hot air at all. I did reach out to Dreame to ask about this. If I do get a response back, I will update the comment section or the description with what they say. But as far as I can tell, the hot water cleaning does not work, or at least there's no hot water. Now, in terms of the cleaning performance, it's not bad, but not the greatest either. As you can see, after the ketchup and coffee test, I let it do the cleaning cycle, and the brush was still stained a little bit with the ketchup. It's not bad, but it's not great either, and I wonder if there was actually hot water, if the performance would have been better or not. Which gets us to the hot air drying, and this one worked exactly as expected. They do advertise 60 degrees, and I did get close to 60 degrees recorded temperature of the hot air, which was great. The cycle runs for 30 minutes, and after 30 minutes, the brushes were almost completely dry. My only gripe with that is it's a bit loud. It's actually louder than you would like if you are sitting in the same room. And the loudness does not come from the hot air drying specifically, but rather they've decided to have the brush constantly rotating, which is great because it creates a more even drying. But the sound of the brush rotating was quite high. As you can see, I even recorded it at about 3 meters away, and it was about 45 decibels. Which is a bit annoying. Now, the cycle is not very long, it's only 30 minutes, but if you have this or you plan on having this in a room where you'll be sitting, it is a bit annoying. If it's in another room where you're not in, and then I guess it's fine. So if I would have any suggestions for Dreame, if they can bring down the sound level of the drying cycle by potentially slowing down the speed at which the brush is rotating. So I'm happy that they rotate the brush. Others in the market, like Roborock, for example, they only rotate the brush every couple of minutes by a couple of degrees. I do think Dreame's approach is better, but I don't think there's a need for the brush to be rotating this fast. It could be rotating at much slower speeds, which should result in much lower volume of the rotating engine. And lastly, after the cycle was done, I emptied the dirty water tank, and here's where I tested out the filter to catch the solid debris. Now, I like their approach in contrast to others like the Roborock, for example, where you have to empty the contents of the water tank into the filter, and then the filter will catch the solid debris. This has a different design, whereby while the filter is attached to the water tank, it's catching the solid debris. I like the idea. The execution could be a bit better. As you can see, there's a big hole in the middle, which sometimes or often would result in some of the solid debris falling through. It's not a deal breaker, and I like their implementation, but I think some minor design tweaks could be better to avoid having the solid debris drop or fall back into the dirty water tank. But all things considered, I do like that they've added that filter versus the H12 Pro. It's again a welcomed addition. Having said that, my final thoughts on the H13 Pro. Let me start with what I liked. So the motorized wheels do make it easier to push the vacuum forward. However, I did find the maneuverability was not that great. So the cleaning head doesn't pivot a lot, if that makes any sense. So it makes driving it or maneuvering around, let's say, corners and whatnot, and not that great. As you can see in the footage, I would have liked if the cleaning head would pivot a bit more and there would be more range of motion, but still it is easy to roll it, and the motorized wheels do help a lot. The cleaning performance, as I expected and as was the case with H12 Pro, is excellent. So in terms of cleaning, I thought this cleaned really well, and even stuck and dried stains, I think it did a really good job at cleaning them. And I love the edge to edge or the dual edge cleaning, which means I can get close to the edges on both sides of the brush. And the drying mode, while it was noisy, it was effective, and it only took 30 minutes. The Roborock Diet Pro, for example, while it advertises hot air drying, I did find out that it did not use actually hot air, and it took many hours, up to 5-6 hours, to effectively dry the brush. The advantage though, it was silent drying, so there's a trade-off. But all in all, I found the drying on this was quite effective, and after 30 minutes, as I said, the brush is almost completely dry. And lastly, I like how it looks. I think it looks quite sleek, so that's also a point in its advantage. Now moving on to the things I did not like, and I mentioned this before, the maneuverability. I was not very happy with how much the moving head pivoted and how easy it is to maneuver it. That's something I would have liked for it to be better. The loud drying, as I mentioned, also I would have loved if it was a bit more silent. Now again, if you intend to put this in a different room, this might not mean much to you, but in case not, it is quite loud when it's running the drying cycle. The filter is also something I like that they added, but could have been better in the implementation. And the hot water drying, and I'm not sure if I should put this under the things I did not like. I will give them the benefit of the doubt in case I got a defective unit, but if that's not the case and they don't really use hot water to clean, then yeah, misleading advertising. Now, none of these are deal breakers. In most cases, most of the things I don't like, well, I actually prefer having those features, even though they don't work 100% like I want them to, than not having them. The only kind of deal breaker for me is the price. Now, as of the time I'm recording this, Dreame is not officially selling those on the US website yet. In Europe, they're going for 600 euros. In the US, I've seen the recommended price is $800. I've seen them on Amazon anywhere between $700 and $800, which is quite expensive, and which makes all the things that I said I don't like and they're not deal breakers, kind of makes them a deal breaker, because at this price point I expect much more, especially that the H12 Pro is way cheaper. I think it's about $450, and it's discounted often to much less, at about $380. I will put links in the description for both the H12 and the H13, so make sure to check the links to see the price at the moment you're watching this review. But if there's a couple of $100 difference between the H12 Pro and the H13 Pro, despite loving all the upgrades that they've done, I would not justify paying $300 or $400 more for the H13 Pro. Unless money is not an issue at all for you, then yeah, by all means, get the latest and the greatest. So yeah, at this high price point, I'm way less forgiving towards things that could be better. I think they should be better at this price point. There's even no app, for example, which is something you see in the Roborock Diet Pro, which is way cheaper. And what's the benefit of the app? Well, it lets you customize a lot of the settings, which are impossible to customize with the Dreame. So on the Roborock, you can customize how much water flow you want. You can customize the duration of the drying cycle. You can choose between fast drying and slow drying. So there's a lot of things you can customize, which again, at this price point, I would expect. So all in all, is it a good machine? Yes. Is it too expensive for what it offers? Yes. So unless you really don't have an issue splurging and spending money on these, I would consider others like the H12 Pro or the Roborock. And speaking of, the Roborock will be releasing very soon a new range of their wet and dry vacuums, which I do intend to review. So if you're interested in that, make sure to subscribe to my channel to get a notification whenever I release that video. Again, I'll put links in the description. If you do decide to purchase this, I would appreciate if you would go through one of those links. These are affiliate links. I may earn a small commission on some purchases at no extra cost to you. This will greatly help support the channel. That's all for now. Let me know in the comments section what you thought about the H13 Pro. And as always, if you liked the video, please hit the like button and consider subscribing to my channel, as this encourages me to continue producing content. Until next time, cheers.